Stephen King adaptations aren't all the same kind of horror. Some disturb you, some haunt you, and some just go for the throat. This list is about the ones that don't hold back. We're ranking these based on three things: how graphic the violence actually is, how often it happens, and how long it stays with you after. Because the bloodiest movie isn't always the one with the most kills. Sometimes it's the one that makes you sit with it. Start with the one that doesn't look brutal until it suddenly is. At 7 is The Dark Half, directed by George A. Romero, and it starts like a story about identity before it turns into something much more physical. The film follows Thad Beaumont, a writer who secretly publishes violent crime novels under a pseudonym, George Stark. When he decides to kill off that persona publicly, Stark doesn't stay fictional. He shows up physically. From there, the movie splits into two tracks: Thad trying to prove his innocence, and Stark moving through people connected to him, removing them one by one. What makes Stark unsettling isn't just that he exists, it's how casually he operates. He talks like Thad, moves like him, but everything about him feels stripped of restraint. There's a pattern to the killings. People who helped create Stark, people who exposed him, all of them get pulled into it. The violence is direct. No stylization, no build-up music telling you something's coming. There's a murder involving a razor that lands fast and feels uncomfortably real. Another with a screwdriver that's even harder to sit through because of how plain it is. And the film doesn't just linger in a dramatic way, it just moves on. Like the act itself wasn't meant to be a spectacle. That's what defines the film. It's not excessive, it's immediate. And that makes it stick more than something louder would. If you're into horror rankings like this, subscribe. We've got more Stephen King and horror list on the channel. And if you want the modern horror names behind movies like these, check out our The New Kings and Queens of Horror ranking after this. There's Stephen King crossover there too. At 6 is Carrie, directed by Kimberly Pierce, and this one leans fully into the idea of pressure building until it has nowhere to go. The story follows Carrie White, played by Chloe Grace Moretz, a quiet high school student raised under strict religious control by her mother, played by Julianne Moore. At school, she's bullied constantly, not just casually, but systematically. It starts with humiliation, escalates into isolation, and eventually turns into something planned. At home, it is no safer. Her mother treats everything as sin, locking her into a cycle of guilt and fear. And slowly, Carrie realizes she has telekinetic abilities. The film tracks that shift carefully. For instance, objects moving, doors slamming, control slipping when emotions spike. There's a classroom scene where things begin to respond to her without her fully understanding why. It's subtle, but it definitely sets the tone. Then comes prom. The prank is set up in advance, a bucket of pig's blood rigged above the stage. You see the planning, you see the intention, that matters. And when it drops, the movie doesn't rush the reaction. It holds on Carrie for just long enough, confusion turning into realization before everything breaks. After that, it's a full-scale destruction. Students thrown, glass shattering, fires spreading, exits blocked. The entire space turns into a controlled environment where she dictates everything. Even the doors locking isn't random, it's a choice. What makes it feel intense isn't just the destruction, it's that every face in the room is someone she knows, which makes the violence feel directed and not random. And that's why it lands the way it does. Would you rank Carrie this high, or is it more tragic than brutal for you? 5 is Graveyard Shift, and this is where the list starts getting properly messy. Directed by Ralph S. Singleton, the film is set almost entirely inside an old textile mill that's being cleaned out for reopening. The setup is simple. A group of workers are hired for an overnight shift to clear out years of grime, waste, and infestation. What they don't know is that something has been living in the mill far longer than any of them. The film takes its time establishing the environment first, first. So you see the scale of the place, multiple floors, hidden tunnels, machinery that hasn't been touched in years. There are early hints, rats behaving strangely, workers noticing sounds that don't match anything they can see. Then people start disappearing. At first, it's spaced out. Someone doesn't return from a lower level, another is found dead, but not in a way that feels like an accident. And eventually, the film reveals what's behind it. A massive, mutated bat-like creature living deep inside the structure. This is where the film becomes fully physical. There's a sequence in the tunnels where characters are crawling through narrow spaces, trying to move forward while something is clearly moving behind them. You can hear it before you see it, and when it hits, it's not clean. It's frantic, loud, and completely uncontrolled. Bodies aren't just killed, they are torn apart, left in pieces that other characters then have to find. The setting makes it worse. There's nowhere to run, no open space, just corridors, ladders, and darkness. The blood isn't constant, but when it shows up, it is heavy. Not stylized, not quick, just raw practical effects doing the work. At 4 is The Night Flyer, and this one feels colder. Directed by Mark Pavia, the story follows Richard Dees, a tabloid reporter chasing a string of murders tied to a pilot who lands at small airports under fake names. The pattern is simple. A plane arrives, people are found drained of blood. Then it moves on. At first, the film plays like an investigation. Dees is cynical, more interested in the story rather than the victims. He moves from location to location, talking to witnesses, piercing together the pattern. You see small details, logs, names, timestamps that slowly build the trail. But the further he goes, the less normal it feels. Each stop leaves behind something worse than the last. And not just bodies, but environments that look disturbed, like whatever happened there didn't end cleanly. As Dees follows the trail, the film stays grounded. Motels, airstrips, empty hangars. It feels procedural at first until it doesn't. The reveal of the killer shifts the film fully into horror, a vampire, but not the romantic kind. Pale, feral, almost animal-like, and completely detached from anything human. Violence here is much sharper than the films before. There's a sequence involving an airport restroom that builds slowly, quiet, contained, and then completely flips once Dees realizes he's not alone. By the time you see what happened inside, it's already too late. Blood covering walls, mirrors, surfaces, not shown as a spectacle, but as aftermath. And that's what makes it land. You don't always see the act, you see what's left behind. And sometimes that's worse. And from here, the list stops being messy, brutal, and starts getting personal. 3 is Pet Sematary, and that is where the violence stops feeling external. Directed by Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer, the story follows the Creed family moving into a rural home near a highway where trucks never seem to stop passing. From the beginning, there's a sense of something being slightly off. The road is constant, loud, dangerous. Behind the house is the burial ground, a place local kids use to bury pets. It feels harmless at first, almost ritualistic. And beyond that, something older. A place that doesn't just bury things, it brings them back. When death hits the family, the film doesn't rush it. It lets the loss sit first. The shock, the quiet, the way everything in the house changes without anything being said. Then the idea enters. Bury them there and they come back, but not the same. The 2019 version changes one major detail from the original, shifting which character is brought back, and that changes the entire dynamic of the second half, because now the violence isn't just about grief, it's about control slipping inside a family that's already breaking. There's a sequence late in the film where the house itself turns into a closed space of threat. Rooms that felt safe earlier now feel tight. Movement is slower, every corner feels watched, and the attacks aren't chaotic. They are deliberate, focused, almost calculated. The return character does not lash out randomly. They move with intention, which makes every moment feel more controlled and more unsettling. That's what makes it uncomfortable. This isn't random horror, it's something you choose to bring back and now have to live with. Act 2 is The Mist, directed by Frank Darabont, and this is where scale and pressure fully take over. The film begins with a storm, trees down, power cut, the sense that something has already shifted before the mist even appears. Then the fog rolls in, thick, unnatural, and completely blocking visibility beyond a few feet. A group of people end up trapped inside a supermarket, cut off from everything outside. And at first it feels temporary. Just wait it out. Then the first attack happens. A man is dragged into the mist, fast, violent, and confusing enough that people aren't even sure what they saw. And from there, it escalates. Each attempt to interact with the outside world goes worse than the last. The loading dock sequence is where it shifts completely. A group steps out carefully, thinking they understand the risk, and within seconds, everything collapses. Creatures hitting from different directions, people pulled away before anyone can react properly. And the film keeps adding layers. Different types of creatures, different forms of threat, each one more aggressive, more invasive. But the real breakdown happens inside. As fear builds, the group fractures. People start looking for control, for meaning, for someone to tell them what's happening. That's where Mrs. Carmody takes over, turning fear into belief, belief into authority. And suddenly, the threat isn't just outside, it's internal. There are moments where the tension inside the store feels more dangerous than anything in the mist. And then there's the ending. Not the bloodiest moment visually, but one of the most brutal decisions in any Stephen King adaptation. It's quiet, controlled, final. And what makes it hit harder is how close it comes to being unnecessary. The timing is what breaks it. And once it lands, the film doesn't give you any space to process it. It just ends. At number 1 is Dr. Sleep, directed by Mike Flanagan, and this is where brutality becomes deliberate. The film follows Danny Torrance as an adult, played by Ewan McGregor, still carrying the trauma of The Shining. He's quieter now, controlled, working small jobs, keeping himself stable, but nothing about his past is resolved. Then he connects with a young girl named Abra who has abilities even stronger than his. And that's what draws the true knot. They don't operate like typical villains. They travel, they observe, and they wait. They're patient in a way that makes them feel more organized than dangerous at first, until you see how they survive. They feed on what they call steam, the psychic energy released when someone with abilities is tortured. Not killed quickly, drained. There's a sequence involving a young boy captured, surrounded, and slowly broken down that the film refuses to rush. You see the setup, you see the control they have over the situation, and then it just continues longer than you expect it to. The camera does not cut away to spare you, it stays. And that's where the film separates itself from everything else on this list. It's not just showing violence, it's asking you to sit through it. Even outside that moment, the film keeps that same tone. When Danny finally confronts them, it's not explosive in the usual sense. It's methodical. Every move feels like it's been thought through, not reacted to. And when the story returns to the Overlook Hotel, the violence becomes more psychological again, but now it carries everything that came before it. Nothing feels isolated. Everything feels connected. It's not chaotic, it's structured, and that makes it much worse. That's the pattern across these films. The further up the list you go, the less the violence is about shock and the more it's about intent. Not how much is shown, but how it's used. And that's where Stephen King adaptations hit differently. They don't just show you something brutal, they make you understand why it happened. So, which Stephen King adaptation is the hardest for you to sit through? Drop your pick in the comments.